So welcome to the Intermediate Georgia Old Time Banjo Workshop here at the Kennedy Creek Old Time Festival at 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. So I'm supposed to talk a little bit and show you all some stuff about Georgia Old Time Banjo, which is kind of a scary assignment to me because I'm like, I've been really into like Georgia string band music for a long time. I'm like, what in the world is Georgia Old Time Banjo? Because I guess like in the canon of like classic old time Georgia fiddle music, there's really not an awful lot of like banjo playing, or at least like prominent banjo playing. So I think we can talk about some different ways to approach accompaniment and stuff, and some maybe right hand techniques. How many people out there are clawhammer banjo players, primarily or exclusively? So I think we're going to try to do none to very little clawhammer stuff, and we can explore some other stuff. Because if you go and you listen to like all the classic string bands of the 20s and 30s and from Georgia, and even like later folks who are recorded by people like Art Rosenbaum, what you really don't hear is a lot of just straightforward bum ditty clawhammer stuff. I mean, maybe even like not at all. Like Land Norris, I guess, would be on our chronology. He's maybe the first, actually he's one of the first all-time banjo players to record like at all, but he's a like just straight ahead, straightforward clawhammer guy. But beyond that, he's kind of the only figure associated with Georgia that I can think of. So we got some different techniques we can explore and stuff. So I guess to start out, there's sort of, or at least my impression of what maybe, Fate Norris or Bud Landris or whoever's playing banjo in like Skill Lickers or Yellowhammer's recordings are doing. I think there's kind of a real simple style that they have, and we can kind of just maybe go over that and to start with. So it's all of these styles are very strummy, and when we get into some things that are a little more melodic, there's still going to be like a maybe some upstroke as well stuff. But so if you listen, maybe a good, I'll also try to reference some recordings that y'all can go home and maybe, whatever you absorb or remember from this workshop, you can, visit those recordings when you get home and maybe sort of unpack it a bit more. But so one thing that I would, set of recordings that I would recommend is Bill Chitwood and Bud Landris recorded really early on before they were using electric microphones and stuff, and they're just fiddle and banjo duets. So it's a good place to really hear what the banjo is doing. So let's see. So something that they do on there, we'll kind of maybe run through some of the tunes that they're doing, and I'll kind of share what I think they're doing. But all right, so let's get down to actual techniques. So there's kind of a basic stroke. I guess you could call it like a thumb lead thing. And again, so to, use some very specific and technical musicological terms, we're not going to be like bum diddying so much. I think we want to think maybe more waka waka instead of bum diddy or something. So it's the stroke that I hear them doing a lot, starts with your thumb. So you're gonna, and there's some variations on it, but maybe as just a simple place to start. So thumb, down, up. And then you can vary it up and go thumb, down, up, thumb string. So, yeah, let's all right, let's start with not using the thumb string, I guess, and just this real basic. And we're grabbing maybe 2 or 3 strings on the upstroke too. And, okay, great. That sounds wonderful. We're all doing it together in good time. Okay, so, and then you can vary that in different ways, and you can go adding the thrum string. We got that? Cool. And so once you sort of have that established as kind of the basic rhythmic unit that you're working with, we can think of this as like a thumb-led style. And so we can kind of start to if any of you play like thumb-led two-finger style, do we have anybody out there who's kind of familiar with that style? We're sort of like fusing these things together. So a real simple tune that we could kind of demonstrate is Johnny Get Your Gun, and that's one that, there's a recording of Chitwood and Landris doing, so you can listen to that. But I'm going to get Sarah to help demo with me here. We can kind of hear what that might sound like applied to, accompanying a real simple fiddle tune here. So we're going to give it a shot.
All right. What kind of tempo do you want?
We can do demonstration, slower,
all right.
Not super slow. But.
So. So, it's maybe not the most exciting thing that I'm teaching you all here today, but it's just got a little bit of a different feel than like if we were to play that claw hammer, another way to sort of vary it up, I guess the thing that is effective about this style and the way it works so well with like Georgia fiddling is, there's so much like kind of short bow and syncopation and stuff going on in this music. And, in this like kind of flipper thing we've got going on, you can even kind of double time it. And so, you can kind of get a drive going in a way that you can't with claw hammer, I guess, and it seems to suit this music pretty well. So let's talk about what I was doing on Johnny Get Your Gun just now. So basically, we've got that same stroke, and we're just picking out a real simplified version of the medley and just applying it to that. So just the bare essential notes, I feel like you kind of got to play below that fiddle part is. How does it go? I don't know. I can't do it when I'm not playing it. Yeah. So, anyway, let's try to see if we can catch that all together. We'll do it slow here. So, all right. Got a little count here. So.
So, I guess every so often we should probably kind of pause, and if anybody has any questions or thoughts about what we're doing, or here's an opportunity for that. That's right. Yeah, I think it's best to sort of think of this as a thumb-led style, and in my brain, I'm kind of running in the same gears. Like I say, like a thumb-led two-finger style, that the sort of simple style that I think a lot of banjo players are probably already pretty familiar with. Oh yeah, another question. Sure. So we got just these two fingers and just the basic thumb, brush down, brush up. So that's just the core unit of it is. Sometimes you kind of leave it to maybe play a line or something. Okay. Yeah, the finger. Yeah, so it's kind of you're kind of using your index finger like a flipper, really.
A lot of people aren't anchoring their hand. Could you explain how you anchor?
Yeah, I would recommend this as for this technique. Keep maybe these two fingers kind of planted down most of the time if you can. I mean, like a guitar player might if they're a flat picker, a finger picker. A lot of folks play that way. But yeah, I think that probably helps with the technique. But again, it's kind of old-time banjo, no real steadfast rules about technique and stuff. And I guess I would encourage people to follow what seems to be working for them. But yeah, I guess, am I keeping it planted? I'm not even.
I just noticed it, so I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. I think I find it helpful, I guess, yeah.
Target the
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's a thumb-led style, so you can't really get down onto this first string without kind of making some changes to how you're doing it, and so yeah, it's gonna.
There's a lower two, maybe third.
Kind of on these three, yeah.
And the first finger's hitting the first two. It's like maybe the first three strings.
Two or three. You don't have to be specific necessarily, but you just want to have a couple of notes resonating in there, because it's a nice full and strummy sort of sound that I guess in a way maybe would be like a suitable accompaniment that fills things out more if you don't have a guitar player present or something. There are some tunes where, I guess the way this melody works, like I'm not using it at all in what we've demonstrated so far, but let's say you wanted to do a different melody. So, all right, so let's back up to, all right, so we've got, and there's different ways you can vary that, and one might be, we're still doing the same thing, and it's thumb, strum, strum, thumb, strum, strum, but we're starting maybe on this G string, and then as an alternate, you're hitting the thumb string.
is, I think, this is primarily like an accompaniment style, and if, you listen to some other recordings, you can hear just songs being accompanied in this style, and it's becomes a lot, they don't try to follow the melody at all, really. It's just all a strumming thing, and you hear different approaches, and you hear like that with the thumb string sometimes, or like adding another strum in there, so to kind of like double time it and give it that feel. There's a really great record that Gid Tanner made on his own, where he does, what does he do? He does Gotta Quit Drinking Shine and If You Want to Go Courtin', and he's just, being comedian Gid Tanner and singing silly songs. But he does, he goes into like so many different kind of variations on these type techniques that, we couldn't really get into them in an hour's time, but simple building blocks, but like there's all sorts of different ways you can go with it in terms of just the rhythmic variation. And I think really, when I'm trying to play old-time banjo, I kind of moved away from like more melodic clawhammer approaches a long time ago. And one thing that kind of is maybe overarching in my approach, regardless of maybe like the whether I'm playing three finger or whatever, I think what I aim to do, and I think what these styles are effective for, is kind of maybe trying to rhythmically kind of follow the bowing patterns and stuff, or do something that at least is in conversation with the fiddle rhythms and stuff. So as you if you try to adopt this style, and as you play with fiddlers and stuff, you can kind of, I would make that sort of something to work towards, where, try to pick up on the bowing patterns and kind of replicate them with your, in this case, with this style, your little flipper finger. So you were asking about the thumb string, and so we can apply this to like another tune, and one, certain melodies have more space in them. So Johnny Get Your Gun doesn't really allow doesn't give us any time to get the thumb string into the pattern, but a tune like Hand Me Down My Walking Cane kind of has these pauses, so you can kind of play the little bit of the melodic phrase that needs to happen, and then for the rest of the measure, you fall back on that pattern. So I guess what I mean, let's see. That's how's it go? So let's see. All right, let's break that down. Like I say, it's we've got probably equally simple sort of melody, but it's got some pauses in it, and so we kind of so we want to go so for the first bar is our important little melodic phrase, and then we've got some space to fill. So if we want to, let's just try that little phrase a couple times all together. So.
Yes. And it's, it's funny because like for years, when people talk about, oh, what's the banjo doing on Skillet Lickers records? I've heard people sort of conjecture that it's like a tenor banjo maybe, because it is being played in such a similar style. It almost might as well be, particularly for just like a big one of these recordings where it's just like the wall of fiddles and it's just a loud band. It's kind of hard to pick up on what's going on in there. But I think it's just through some of these other recordings where the banjo is more clear in the mix, you can kind of pick up on other things that they're doing. But effectively, you could get the same effect just strumming like a 4-string banjo or something as well. But yeah, as far as I know, and through like looking at pictures of those guys back then, it always seems to be a 5-string banjo. There may be exceptions, don't quote me on that. So, any other questions at this time? On a guitar? Or? Well, yeah, I guess that would be like a tenor banjo or a plectrum banjo. Typically that would kind of be on a 4-string banjo. It's kind of relevant to the question that he was asking. And yeah, it's a very similar effect. You're really just using your index finger in lieu of a pick to do all the strumming, but there's more possibilities because you have more than just one implement to use, so we can incorporate our thumb in, and we can get all the strums of a flat pick approach, but then also kind of get some of these melody notes worked in there, and kind of a style that is a little more fluid and old time banjo-y than you could probably achieve with a plectrum. But again, it's like as is often the case, like if you're kind of trying to study all these different old time banjo styles, you can use different techniques to play something that effectively, if you tabbed it out, would look exactly the same. But just as you actually play them, they just sort of deliver slightly different feels and things that are kind of specific to these little regional styles and things that kind of just developed over time. So, this is, as best I understand, the way a lot of those guys were playing back then. And, you may find that you already have techniques that, you can kind of get the same thing, and that's fine, and that's good enough for you. But I figured I would share these insights that I may or may not have correctly gotten from these old records. So, yeah.
Doing your strumming up.
Mm-hmm.
I was finding myself just using my thumb.
Sure.
And what do you use?
That I feel like for me, I use my index finger for all the strumming, because I feel like that would set me up so say if our pattern is thumb, strum, strum, thumb, strum, strum, if I'm strumming up with my thumb, then I've got to get it back to start the whole phrase over again. I feel like that doesn't leave room for me to comfortably. It's just harder for me.
Strumming down.
I'm
Down, strumming. You're strumming down.
strum down, strum up. So
It's like up, strum up.
yeah.
How do you do that?
I just use my index finger, so yeah, and that's easier for me. All of these things with just practice are going to become more fluid, and if you find that strumming up with your thumb, it comes more naturally to you, and you can make that a fluid movement, and it works, then I would say go for it. Because that's how these weird approaches to playing the banjo come into being, is because people weren't
they didn't, yeah, and nobody had a instructor drilling them on the specific technique. And, to me, that's a lot of the fun of all this music is, I feel like the banjo just naturally requires you to, it's like asymmetrical and stuff, and it requires kind of an idiosyncratic approach. And, so lean into that.
Every time when you're coming up on the upstroke on your index, that you're picking an individual note.
Not in this style. So if you're kind of like the way that you can so this is sort of like a basic thumb lead kind of again, it's like the bum ditty of like a thumb lead, a basic thumb lead style is this. So it makes a lot of sense to me, and I think you'll probably hear people doing it in some of these old recordings where you just incorporate that unit into this strumming pattern. I think they work well together, and you don't really have to change your posture, like, they kind of fluidly work in and out. So if you're trying to articulate a melody and then still kind of fill it out with these strums, I think you could. So you hear I'm kind of just going in and out of those two styles, and like I am picking up an individual note, and it's sort of in the thumb lead two finger roll. When I'm coming up and getting the individual note with my index finger, it's not, it's just in these second two notes that are sort of an accessory to the note that is like actually functioning in the melody, if that makes sense. So it's always gonna probably be like this open D string, or maybe, or if you're playing on a lower string, maybe you would play a different one. Yeah, does that answer? Yeah, sure. Yeah, the thumb lead stuff, you can do it just as easily with 2 or 3 fingers, and that thumb lead finger style is a huge part of like Scruggs banjo. So
Can you talk about the difference, why it's not just bluegrass banjo? It's not the same roll, right?
Yeah, not quite. I mean, I'm not really. They sound the same, and I think there are certainly times where, just in general and also with regard to specific instruments and techniques, there's a little crossover between bluegrass and old time music. But, with bluegrass banjo, I'm not really a bluegrass guy, but, I think you're generally using these rolls that are probably more syncopated and also have like a little bit less of a seam in them, They kind of,
The melody is not as clear either.
yeah.
You need like, it's a little, you need either a singing or something to hold the melody, and here you've got really, really getting that pronounced thumb melody coming out, which isn't always pronounced in bluegrass. It's kind of that, all that rolling kind of dilutes the melody line.
Yeah. And, to me, bluegrass, classic Scruggs style, kind of the first level of like bluegrass banjo, does kind of have this perpetual, like the roll never really stops kind of a thing. And, I think in all.
Evolved from this.
Sure, yeah. And that's why you hear elements of that in here, because, it's all related in a giant web of the 4 million banjo players that have lived in, in the American South or whatever. Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but that's okay. It probably wasn't very important.
That forward embellishing of bluegrass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of times, I think in old time styles, there's a little bit more of like punctuation on the end of phrases and stuff, I guess, probably. And there are old time finger styles that have heavily syncopated rolls that are used, but they're you know, they're a little, you know, if you get into like some styles that you hear a lot in Tennessee back in the 20s and 30s in string bands, you know, you have these kind of like, which again is like not much between that and bluegrass, but the syncopation in those bands and the overall effect is a little more like jarring, and it's, you know, the Scruggs style kind of is a little smoother, and, you know, I don't know if that makes sense, but I digress from our Georgia banjo stuff. So, yeah. Sure. I wasn't. So I think that's kind of a decision that you can make. You know, in the recording that I was kind of inspired by, the Chitwood and Landris, he's on the Johnny Get Your Gun. I mean, I'm articulating the melody more than he is even there, but he's not. He's just playing the melody notes, and the chords are basically just implied. And, you know, I think that's just a matter of preference. I think, you know, you may find that you want to hear those. You know, you want to hear those chords, and that's perfectly a valid way to do it as well. To me, I think particularly when there's not a guitar present to like fill out the harmonic context, you know, sometimes it's a little more interesting and has a little bit more of an archaic fiddle banjo duet sound to me, to like have maybe a chord more implied, or like whatever weird intervals occur when you don't play the chord you're supposed to play. But you know, I like that sort of stuff, and I think it's interesting. So you know, particularly if a guitar player's not around, I might tend towards those type of decisions. But again, it's just a matter of personal preference, I think, you know. But, you know, it's always good to be thinking, you know, about as you play a melody, you know, at what points you could just be playing the chord. And, you know, it's always good to be aware of your chords and how they fit into how you're playing the melody, just as a general note, I would say.
As an example of classically played long style.
Sure. Yeah, excellent.
Just real quick on that piece, could you kind of go over like the ending part of the
Oh yeah. All right. So yeah, that's really happening over a D chord here. So there's a lot of ways we can make our D chord, and I think like the way that the melody. So like if we were to sort of we could play our D chord like this. Is that a shape we're all familiar with? And another note that, you know, you'll see bluegrass banjo players use this shape, where it's the same thing. You might have to finger it differently. It's probably the only way to do it. You have to use your pinky here, and then this note right here, which is an F sharp, I guess. If we're music theory guys, this is the 3 like of our chord. That's in there, and you know, you don't usually, as an old time banjo player, voice the chord that way, but it's often an important note in either in the melody or just like this sort of line that like is in the end of that tune, like it's a good go between like, you know, if we're in G, this is your 1 and your 5. And then there I'm going down to an E. So just that, I guess we'll just to distill that phrase, and I'll play it nice and slow. So as we're doing that, you're kind of, I guess, I don't know if I was explaining it very well before, talking about like, you know, your D chord, but as we're playing that line, you are basically making this shape, which, you know, is a little D chord, you know. So that, you know, that's just the way I'm kind of always trying to, the sort of thing I'm trying to always be aware of as I play, you know, so.
So you're pulling off the third string.
Yeah, and you can simplify it more. You can skip the F sharp and still get the point across.
Are you using pull-offs on the left hand, the one on the back?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, as you're playing melodies, because, you know, the pull-off can kind of be a substitute for right-hand techniques, you know. So it probably makes a lot of sense if we're busy, you know, with our flipper finger over here doing stuff, that you can get more happening at once if you're transferring some of the rhythmic work over to your left hand, you know, when you can. And, you know, that's the sort of thing, and a lot of these things, is the sort of thing that as you just work with this style and whatever your practice regimen on the banjo is, if it's putting a TV show on with closed captions on mute and sitting on the sofa or whatever, as you just do this stuff over and over, you'll just sort of naturally develop, you know, oh, look at that, you know, sort of a feel for and an approach to, I think. So, yeah, so getting back to applying this to a maybe a more commonly played tune. One of the tunes that I had planned on demoing with Sarah is the Buck and Mule. So I guess we can do that. So I realized as I was doing that I was doing a different technique for the stuff on the high string. So I was trying to apply that to the chorus part of that tune. But I think if we want to, like, there's a slightly different index. You can transfer the kind of this approach to an index-led technique. And so I think, you know, in the course of trying to back up fiddle tunes, probably in the way that you're more accustomed to, it would be more useful because you're able to, like, note out stuff on the top string, which actually, you know what? We could let's try doing it with the thumb led technique like this. So. Let's see, how would we do that? I'm going back and forth, but yeah, so you can, so we're starting on this G note here at the 5th fret, and same deal. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Sure.
You were, at the last, you were getting that high note with the thumb or with your index?
At which part? Okay. Yeah. So I'm not using. Yeah. If we're doing it with the thumb led style, yeah, I'm not getting the thumb string really involved at all. You can, but I think just as a place to start, kind of the more simplified unit of like this stroke. So you can get it in there, but I think we should, maybe as a group try to do it without first. Oh yeah. No, it's all this high D string. Yeah. Oh, that's it. Okay. How are we all doing out there? Questions, comments, complaints, concerns?
When you threw that little note in down there, is that just like a...
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's a variation that the fiddle plays sometimes. I guess I was finding that I was like, oh, I'm not exactly sure how to. It's something like that. I was kind of regretting trying to play it because I was like, oh, I don't really know how to articulate that.
What was I doing? That's kind of what you
Oh,
were
okay.
walking up, right?
And if you'd like, I can show another. I can kind of show the index-led version of that. Yeah, it has a close. It's kind of a synthesis of like this other style and clawhammer a bit. So you get a little bit of the gallop of clawhammer. So very similar though, and this is a style that like a lot of. Sort of school of old-time banjo that I've always really liked and kind of tried to play is like in the kind of upper Cumberland Plateau region. If y'all are familiar with like the field work of Bobby Fulcher and like Virgil Anderson and Clyde Davenport and the Troxel brothers, all of these guys kind of play in this style, which is pretty similar. But so it's one of these things like I was kind of saying earlier where you can tab it, and it's the same thing as clawhammer. We've got a bum, diddy, bum, diddy, bum, diddy. The only difference really is that we're picking up for our melody note with our index finger, right? Instead of coming down like in a clawhammer stroke. And I find that works, for like a tune like Buck and Mule, before I like sat down and figured out this sort of diminuted banjo Georgia style that I'm trying to teach all of y'all. It's how I would have approached it. I may be more comfortable for clawhammer players and stuff. So, but and pull-offs are very useful. And similarly, you can, when you're trying to maybe pick out something a little bit more, trying to articulate the melody with a little bit more, notes than that basic stroke allows, you can drop your thumb down and kind of like we were doing with the thumb-led style, you sort of incorporate just this thumb-led two-finger, the basic thing. So like. And again, it like sort of, it achieves kind of the same rhythmic variation as a pull-off might. It just kind of breaks up the maybe if the gallop is getting a little monotonous or there's something in the melody that you kind of want to follow. And I would say that it's good to employ the pull-offs, but also that's a part of this style that's like, just like when you're trying to incorporate your drop thumb into your claw hammer, like kind of that's the part that takes a little while when you're learning the style. It's kind of the same deal with this index-led style to get those little thumb-led rolls, seamlessly worked in there is going to be the thing that takes a little bit more time, I expect. But yeah, that's a great style for accompaniment stuff, and gets a nice brushier feel and kind of a little bit more drive to in a band setting or something. Or again, if you don't have a guitar player in the mix, but you want something that's got more of a drive, yeah.
Are you getting that cool rhythm at the beginning? I couldn't quite see.
Oh yeah, so you can do it with a pull off, or all right, you can do it with, like I'm saying, this like little roll. So just to break that down, up pick, strum, thumb string. So that's our basic thing, and then for like the second half of that. So the second half is like a index, thumb, string, but like index, thumb, but first string, second string, first string, fifth string to verbally tab it out as best I can. Better if I'm not playing, if two of the three notes aren't the same note. That's the basic stroke. And then with the thumb lead roll. So, any questions about kind of that? I don't know. I guess that's what people call like an overhand. I don't know. I get really lost in the minutia of nomenclature of all-time banjo styles, but it's an up-picking brush style. I guess maybe that's what people mean when they say like an overhand style, I think. But anyway, or maybe that's just claw hammer. I don't know. It's important. What's important is that we understand, what's going on there, and have some sense of maybe how to apply it. And all of these brushy styles are really great to just fall back on when maybe you're in a jam and you haven't picked out like the tune yet, and you kind of want to play, but sit back and listen and try to figure out what's going on. So. I was thinking another thing that I wanted to discuss, and we can continue to do it while like practicing and learning these, right-hand techniques, but maybe playing in the key of C some, and like certain kind of Georgia C tunes. It's like a big thing in the style of music, and maybe ways to approach those on the banjo. I don't know if that's
interesting to y'all, there's maybe other directions we could go too. Does that sound good?
And let's not explain a lot of things in C, and I
Sure.
not that familiar with C.
Yeah. So, yeah.
They play in C, they play in drop C or double C.
Well, that's a great question, Dave. I think that you know, it's all like drop classical C. You know, in that part of the world, you know, obviously the sort of dominant approach to old time banjo and D and C these days, you know, at large at the festivals and everything, is to kind of prefer the double C thing. But I think historically, I think that the different tunings kind of have a geographical alignment, and it doesn't really seem like the double C. Maybe Land Norris might have been using it, but Gid Tanner, Bud Landris, what's his name, Uncle Tom Collins. I think that Uncle John Patterson, who is anybody familiar with Uncle John Patterson here? A couple of you. I would really recommend. He uses kind of seamlessly integrates like a number of right hand styles, and like I certainly don't have a handle on it, and it's like well beyond the sort of level of this workshop. But if you kind of want to see, probably the best example of like a really fully developed style of old time banjo that I think you could say has like a very specifically Georgia character, like, and also there's a lot of recordings of it, like showcase what he's actually doing, and you're not like listening through like four fiddles on like a scratchy 78 and trying to like hear any banjo sounds at all, But he put out a whole LP in the 70s on Arhuli, which I think is probably out there on the internet, and he made some. Actually made some 45s, which are on YouTube. So I would definitely recommend Uncle John Patterson is his name. And any of the like recordings from the 70s, maybe not any of, but most of the recordings with like that Gordon Tanner made, Uncle John Patterson is usually playing with him. There's field recordings like floating around out there with J. Laurel Johnson playing fiddle that John Patterson is playing on. So, if you, I don't think so.
He's from Carrollton.
Yeah, I think that's right. And he also recorded in a band in the late 20s called the Carroll County Revelers. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually would be really interesting to listen to in the context of kind of what we've talked about already. They recorded just 2 songs, but it's like an old time banjo style, and it's not, there's nothing really fancy going on, and it's like super strummy, and it's kind of all over the place. So it would be a good thing to after attending this workshop, and when you go home and reflect on it, something to check out. And if you want, I'm not sure what the best way to deliver, like maybe like a listening sort of list or something to all y'all. Yeah. We can collect emails somehow after this, and I'll send out a follow-up thing if y'all are interested in something like that of some recommended listening, because we can talk about a lot of things in an hour today, but I don't know how.
Do you want to play one of Uncle John's tunes?
Yeah, I can. I was trying to. Oh, I hadn't tuned yet. So really the only one that, most of the recordings I've heard, he's accompanying a fiddle, and it's kind of not a strong melodic thing, but there's one tune that he plays that, if y'all have seen Mick Kinney perform, or, it's one that he's fond of called Make My Coffee Black. And Mick is kind of, I think, filled out like his own sort of arrangement of the tune. But if you want to check on YouTube, it's one of the ones that he recorded on like a 45, and it's a more straightforward kind of old time banjo setting of the tune. And, the melody is kind of funny. It doesn't really sound, when it's harmonized the way that they're playing it on the recording, or when you back it up with those chords, it sounds like a John Hartford song or something to me. Like it has this like, this like major 7 note in there that kind of sounds more like a 1970s thing or something. But so I guess there's value in explaining. When you hear like Mick do it, he makes he like harmonizes it with like this kind of ragtime progression. And then kind of those chords. But anyway, so, and as best I can tell, what Uncle John is doing is that index-led stroke style that we most kind of recently covered here. So I don't know how well I can demo it. I kind of just tried to learn it this week, and he's kind of getting some different stuff in there. And then he goes, and then back to the, yeah, I haven't learned it really, have I? Then he goes to the 2, I don't know, I'm sorry. Maybe the answer was no, I don't really have Uncle John tune that I can demonstrate for you, but that was, that was something a little more melodic that's applying some of the stuff we've already learned. I'm not really sure how he does he's got a guitar behind him, so he can kind of like allow for some more space in there, and he does go into some like, to the how we do. There's like a 2-5-1 thing that he kind of just arpeggiates through the chords, but that would be a great one to reference, and I'll throw that on like the listening thing, listening recommendations, because it is a pretty good thing that combines a lot of the elements of what you might considered to be like kind of Georgia old-time music or old-time banjo, the sensibilities and all that kind of in one place. It's G, yeah. So
for C, you're saying you do the tuning, what's the
So, yeah, this is sort of in like, they call this the classical C. It's kind of the only or the standard classical or the banjo tuning used in like the classic banjo stuff from like the late 19th and early 20th century, kind of the world of like Fred Van Epps and Wes Osman and people like this. That's ragtime, kind of light classical banjo music that people learn from these banjo method manuals and stuff. It's a little bit more formal, but I guess that is. I guess it's up for debate, but that seems to be where that sort of entered the mainstream of just banjo playing in general. And a lot of old-time players favor that for C stuff. I do as well. So it's very similar to just the tuning we're already in. The only thing that you're going to do, and this is why people call it drop C sometimes, you're just going to drop that low, your 4th string, the D, down to a C. So, and there's you may have encountered it outside of sort of this context, that, Charlie Poole, of course, yeah, and there's like, that like sort of round peak roustabout tune that a lot of people like, that like Fred Cocker and stuff played. There are some like older mountain style tunes that use this tuning, but generally it's really useful for kind of a more chord-based approach, which it was kind of something I wanted to go over, which I think is really useful for like a lot of these Georgia C tunes, which maybe are quite a bit harder to follow if you're trying to stick more to the melody, or it just kind of sounds a little bit more natural for a tune, like a Rocky Palette or something like that. I've certainly seen a lot of melodic clawhammer banjo players like follow the whole thing without really playing the chords, but it's good to like just have this approach in your pocket as well. Like I say, for when you don't know what's going on, you're trying to catch up, or just because it's fun and it sounds nice on its own too. So
demonstrate that
yeah, so I think we were going to demo Texas Gals, and maybe I'll try to
show like just some of the techniques we've already used. I personally, like over the years, my kind of default running mode is like just like a more of a simple 3-finger kind of style. So yeah, I'll maybe employ a variety of sort of right hand things, and maybe I'll try to show some different ways to make the chords, and then afterwards we can kind of break that down, and I can kind of show you maybe like 2 different positions for your basic chords. So yeah, let's try that. Okay, so I tried to run through a lot of different ways of doing it at once. So I think the first thing we should do is talk about the left hand. So your, kind of default first position C chord. Really whatever knowledge you have of chord shapes in standard G, excepting obviously the one string that we've retuned, everything else still applies basically. So, your normal C shape like that you learned, you can do that, but just take this, where you would have your middle finger out, because now you've got a low C there. So you've got a really nice, like rich, full C chord, and like you get this low C that you don't get in the other tuning, So we've got that. Now for our 5 chord, in standard G, we just wouldn't do anything at all, right? So, but the one string we've changed, we've got to do something different because that doesn't work, right? So if we fret the 2nd fret, so that what is now a C string, if we just fret the D, then we've just like recreated standard G tuning. So that's kind of your simplest G chord that you can make in this tuning. And then what you'll quite often hear, and so since we're in the key of C here, your 5 chord can always have a 7 in it, and so the easiest way to make that is to fret this, what is an F note, since that's our 7 in G, that's the 3rd fret of the high D string here. So, just for a real simple, like, going back and forth, you can use either of those. There's the 7, or without it. So those are, probably the 2 most crucial, basic chords to learn. And then if we got those, or any questions about that?
We're doing it G7 and G.
Yeah, just showing either one, and as the, I guess use your ears.
I guess the character of the tune might, you might decide that including the 7 or not including the 7 sounds more correct or something. I guess it gives it a little bit more of like a jazz age ragtime kind of a feel to like always play those dominant 7s in your dominant chords. It fits with Georgia music, I find. But then, more often than not, in the recordings from the 20s that I was sort of referencing earlier, when I was going back and listening, I was finding that like Gid Tanner and Bill Chitwood weren't really playing the 7 chord. But so it's just kind of, again, a personal choice.
Have you ever played this note with that? I see people doing that.
You could. I guess it probably depends a lot on, just what you're trying to do. If you need to do that to work it into a melody, I'd say before you go stretching your hand out like that, it's probably important to consider like, I have that note right here. Can I just get it without making this shape? But particularly if you're trying to play classic banjo or something, those are more challenging and like melodic pieces, so you're gonna end up doing stuff like that. But in old-time banjo, I would say that's generally not that useful of a shape. But so we've got our 1 and our 5. Your kind of first position default C chord, F chord. Our 4 here is we're gonna fret the G string or 3rd string, 2nd fret to make an A, and then we're gonna play a C, which is fretting the 1st fret of the 2nd string, and then this F note, which is 3rd fret of your high D string, the 1st string. So. And you can play the open C note in there. That note is in the chord. It's a bit of a for just strictly a fiddle banjo situation. It's a little bit of an odd way to voice the chord because you're only 1 in that chord is like kind of on the treble side of things. So if you're playing 3-finger, this is sort of the bass pattern that kind of insists itself. And that's, a 3 and a 5. So that's a weird way to voice the chord. So kind of, if I'm playing without a guitar player below me and like, you really want to voice the chord and get, chords sound more normal when you have the 1 in the bass, basically, is kind of the underlying principle behind what I'm saying. So if you want to voice it that way and get that. So remember our just first position C chord. We're going to turn that into a bar chord and play that on the 4th fret. So we've got, we're just going to lay this down here for those 2 strings, and then middle finger to get this F note. So I guess that's the 6th fret we're fretting, and then on the highest, the D string here, we're gonna fret this 7th fret. So this is what we're gonna end up with. Sounds like we've got it, yeah. And then to extend that, we can also play a 5 chord. If we just go up, move that up a whole step. So that's something that that can be a nice like way to move through the chords, particularly on like in Texas Gals or Rocky Palette or anything like that, where you've kind of got one of these C shuffle things that's moving through the 1-4-5. And there's another C shape up there. Doggos, okay. And another thing that I will do, I'm, more of a guitar player and kind of, playing in this tuning particularly, I found myself kind of approaching the backup style more like you thinking like a guitar player, and something about having, your root note just as like the lowest note on your instrument makes it a lot easier to kind of put together bass runs like a guitar player might, So that's something that,
particularly like getting up to that 4. That's something you'll hear like Charlie Poole do a lot. And then you can even go beyond that. So I would,
There's a lot of
yeah.
love you as a banjo player. You can spend the time and learn how to do this, getting those little walk.
Yeah, and I think a really crucial thing for just kind of having some bearings for making runs, like when you're playing guitar runs, you're, just finding different ways to get between the bass notes. So you kind of have like a roadmap. Like if I'm really just using the major scale there, right? So. And, of course, you'll get some chromatic things in there, like to get from the 4 to the 5. And then we can get back home again, going from our G, just using the, major scale. Or, I'll usually go back down, and then you're free to, go back to whatever C position you want. So I guess I realized I was just using it, so I'll show you 2 other positions to make a C chord with in this tuning. So we've got 1 here, and then if we just bar these 3 strings here on the 5th fret, and then we can still use Mr. Low C here. So that's 1. And then also, so this is a shape that like, in G tuning, if you know, like this sort of bar chord that you might use for a G, it's basically like if you're a guitar player, it may help or may confuse you to think of it as like sort of kind of the same shape as a F chord on a guitar. But of course you got to adjust for this one tune the string differently, or tuned differently, but maybe that's not helpful. But so anyway, we've got a B here, so 3rd string, 4th fret, 2nd string, 3rd fret, and the 1st string, 5th fret. So just this basic shape. Here, it's a G, right? So another good thing to like get in the habit of, it's like any of these chord shapes can be applied to be any of these chords. You just have to know where they are on the. So if you play that here, it's a G. But if you go up to where that is starting on the 8th fret, so you've got, your fingers are on frets 8, 9, and 10 here. That is a C chord, which is where I started. So let's see. So we've got C chord. We all got that one, right? 1st position, we'll call that. 2nd position, we all got that one. And then we can go all the way up here, and we've got another one.
Yeah, there are a lot of tunes where there's just a lot of C for a long time. It's
Right.
really nice if you could know these 2 variations.
Sure. And it can also help if you're approaching it like finger style. I find that you can kind of play pretty basic rolls, and if you're moving chord positions, you'll find that you're kind of getting some of the melody notes in there, just, so, you might, over the course of like, say you've got 4 bars of C or something, you might shift between different positions, either just to keep it interesting, or you may, as you just get used to, using this approach, find that like, whatever it is you're doing syncs up with like the tune in a certain way. If you shift positions at certain, there's like a Uncle Dave sort of little thing that he plays, Uncle Dave Macon, that I guess kind of illustrates that sort of thing well. Where he's like, moving between these, basically the 1st and 2nd position really quickly in a roll, but it allows for some more sort of movement of things. I don't know, that's kind of maybe a bit more than we can get into to really break that down. But also in this tuning, questions about anything? G chord, yeah. So, yeah, let's go through several different G chord positions that we can do. So, all right, we've got first position where we're just getting the banjo back to where it was when it was standard G tuning, right? So we're only fretting this, what's now our C string at the second fret. And then you can get what I guess I use, and I would say is like our second position here, is what it's the same shape as like the third position C that we were in earlier. It's just moved down here to where you're on frets 3, 4, and 5. But when you're making that shape, there's not really a great way. You can this is a harder way to make it. You kind of have to skip the C string to do it in its simplest way. Like you can do this, and you've got that D down in there, but if you're kind of just leave that out, you know. And then the third G chord that I might use quite a bit is just the bar version of our C shape, the first position C on the 7th fret up here. So, you know, as you sort of employ all these chord shapes, and I know it's it's a lot all at once here, but it's
Good overview. I think a lot of people may not have had that exposure. I think it's great. So I mean, don't worry about trying to do everything.
Sure.
But I think you want to add people where they're flat, where you want to.
yeah. What one just
Half an hour. I mean, I don't want to.
sure. Well, just one note, like as I'm presenting all these chord shapes, it's really good to think about, you know, kind of think of yourself in first or second or third position and be like, all right, if I'm up here, where's the closest place to get my 4 chord? Where's the closest place? You know, so, all right, I'm camped out up the neck playing in C. You know, you might be doing that. Or say I'm camped out on this second position. I mean, there's a million ways to do it, but what's like the adjacent 4 here? Well, the easiest thing, you don't even have to move your hand hardly, but, and then for a 5, like, you know, those are all kind of in the neighborhood. So, you know, basically, I guess what I'm saying is to sort of be cognizant of like economy, you know, so that you can voice all these chords without having to go. I mean, you can do that, and there's a time and a place for that. You know, you can really, if you want to, if you're doing the strummy stuff, like where we kind of started out, that is something that you'll hear. Like for years, I was like, is there a Hawaiian guitar on like the Georgie Ellihammer's version of Picture on the Wall? Because you hear, and I was like, oh, it's the banjo. He's just like, he's doing all that strummy stuff, and he's just sliding the whole chord shape up into position. So yeah, you can do that, but just as an exercise in, you know, thinking about how all these shapes relate to each other, I would encourage you to sort of, you know, one, think about the ways to get to your 1 and your 4 and your 5 without moving all over the place. And then also, okay, I've got this shape. How can I use that shape to make an F? Where is that on the, you know, just on the fretboard? So anyway, all right, now, questions and anything like that?
One thing we wanted to get closer, since now it's fewer people, and if anyone's trying, can't see the chord positions. Is that sort of moved up a little, or you're okay? You're right.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, all right, so, you know, to think of it, if, you know, the 4 chord, if you want to think of it that way, I mean, the easiest way, if we're just, if we're thinking of it in terms of scale degrees, right, and we've got, we're playing our major scale just on this C, so we can use that first position, right, so, and then count to 4 on our major scale, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and play the bar version of that C chord in first position. So yeah, so you can just bar that, and then so the chord is.
You are barring the low string.
I am. I'm pretty much barring the whole thing, really. And
Can we just get away with barring all of it?
well, you can't. So in that, all right, if you wanted,
This C tuning, if you were in double C, could you just bar everything?
you would still have to. It's actually easier. There's a more in this tuning, just this shape, which a G here, an F here, or a C here. If we were in double C, right now I'm in double C. There's neither one is a completely open tuning, but there's not like the advantage of the drop C is there still is like a major triad built into the tuning, but like to move around a shape, the closest that you can get to a bar in double C kind of is this, so you still have to fret this high string to get like the 3 of your chord. But they're very close banjo tunings, so like a lot of the ideas, if you just tweak the chord shapes and stuff, you could adapt a lot of the things that I'm talking about, and you can approach double C kind of with a similar type of style, a more chord-based approach.
You
But
say it preserves that major triad, so the 1 and 4 or 5 shape, as you go up.
well, I just mean that like in these top 3 strings, not your lowest and your thumb string, but you've still got a major triad right there. So there is like a useful. You can't do all the strings, but you can just bar those. You do if she was asking about a chord shape where you're really just barring. You can get away with that. You got to sort of omit a couple of strings, but in double C you don't have like a 1, 3, and a 5 all next to each other in the same way that you do in this tuning, if that makes sense. Yeah. I don't think so. The pick, especially with these brushy styles, the pick works in one direction. I guess it depends how you wear your pick. But when I wear finger picks, there's usually like a little bit, it snags, if you're going down. No. Oh, cool. Yeah. And I mean, you could, what are they? It's like an Alaska pick or something. Have y'all ever seen those? It's sort of, there's like, I have a little bit of like a picking nail, which is like very useful for these styles. And like they make picks that imitate that as well. So, if you want, because it is nice to have something to go, help you get a little bit more of a crisp like tone, and to pick out notes more cleanly and everything. So it's not off the table. Yeah.
When you're in a different tuning, is it still helpful to remember the basic F chord shape?
Yeah.
The basic D chord shape, does that still apply?
Sure. So you just the thing to keep in mind is that, am I still there? Okay, I'm still in drop C. So we've really only changed one string. So you can either just omit this lowest string and still make all those shapes and still the same chord, or in some cases, like with some shapes, you can just change what you're doing on the lowest string. For instance, so with the like the D shape all right, we're back in standard G here, right? So we've got this, and now we're back in drop C, right? So in order, we can get the exact same sound, but you just have to we've just moved this whole string down now. So anything that you were fretting or not fretting for, you've got to adjust up a whole fret, right? So now that shape, this was it before. We've just got to now fret that lowest string as well, which is the same shape when you were asking about the F shape. It's the same thing. So, you kind of have to like take the moment to recognize, because, that it is the same shape, But yeah, playing this like, the way that I was framing it was in reference to like this being our first position C chord here, right? But you can think of that as very related to the D shape that you know in standard tuning, right? But because we've retuned our banjo in such a way, it kind of, it actually makes it a better shape for moving around, really. But yeah, that's something without like the aid of like a whiteboard and like drawing out, like tabbing out these chord shapes. It's kind of difficult to explain, but as you continue to like work with these chord shapes and stuff, I think it will begin to make sense, particularly if you're like making an effort to, stop and pause and be like, okay, how, F chord in this position in drop C, F chord in this position in standard G, and like think about how you make each of them.
Half step, which is a whole step.
Right. And, all of this is made easier. It's not really, I guess, standard probably to like be in old time music instruction to be like very music theory sort of like focus. But I find that like if that sort of stuff is way easier if you take the time to be aware of like in your chord shapes, what's the 1 and the 3 and the 5. And once you begin to think in those terms, that's like a bit of a struggle at first, but I think it's really worth it because then it's so much easier to kind of understand on the fly, what chord, how to use the chord shapes that and like what, notes are in there and which chord shape might suit like a certain part of a melody better and stuff like that. Just, that just as a sort of general note, I would recommend that, although, yeah, as a guitar player or, just as a musician in general, it's not necessarily part of the tradition of old time music, I guess, but,
But it's why things sound good.
yeah, and none of us are true blue backwoods old time musicians that learn, from our grandfather. So, we don't need to, hold ourselves to some made up standard or something. Make it easy on yourself. Make it light on yourself, as Uncle Dave Macon would say.